Yes, we witnessed another Boston Bruins blown lead and an overtime loss, but I don't think it's as bad as it looked from above. And are the Boston Bruins circling back on Elias Lindholm? Let's discuss it on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Wednesday, March 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're going to talk about Boston's overtime loss last night to the Edmonton Oilers, what they could be doing ahead of the trade deadline, and take a look at the market in general and kind of where they fit into the mix. I want to remind you quickly, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, it was a pretty even game last night, all things considered. 26 shots apiece. Neither team was able to connect on two power play opportunities. The Bruins took a lead in the third period, 4:26 of the final frame, with Pavel Zacha slapping home a one-timer from Danton Heinen and Parker Witherspoon. But as has been a trend for this team lately, they could not hold on. Leon Draisaitl scored with about a minute 20 to go in the third period, and then he added the overtime winner to give the Oilers the 2-1 victory. Very frustrating. You know, we've seen this film before, but when you consider the fact that the Bruins had played the night before in Toronto and won pretty handily, 4-1 over the Maple Leafs, they traveled home after that game. According to Sportsnet, they didn't get home until about 3 a.m. And then you come back that night and have to take on Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, the Edmonton Oilers, Evan Bouchard. I mean, to hold them to 0 goals until 18:40 of the third period, I mean, in some ways, it's pretty impressive. To get 3 or 4 points from the Leafs and the Oilers back-to-back nights with cross-border travel and a late arrival time or early, depending on your look at it, you can spin this as a positive for the Boston Bruins. Certainly, they were exhausted by the end of the night, and I mean, it's incredibly difficult to keep the Oilers to fewer than 2 goals in any given game. Now, one thing that I found a bit curious was the overtime deployment. On the final shift, you had McDavid, Draisaitl, and I believe Evan Bouchard was out there as well. For the Bruins, you had 2 defensemen out there in Brandon Carlo, Charlie McAvoy, and I can't remember who the center was, but 2 defensemen out there. It almost as though the Bruins were treating this as a bit of a penalty kill, like actively trying to just preserve the point and take it to a shootout rather than pushing for that extra point and going, man on man with the best of the best in the Oilers and what they have to offer. That's my only quibble there. Is I would have put 2 forwards out there, put your best players out there. Pastrnak did have a giveaway earlier in overtime, a couple of giveaways, which I'm sure displeased head coach Jim Montgomery. It was Frederick out there with Carlo and McAvoy, a real kind of penalty killing unit, not an aggressive. And I know if they had won that face-off, then they probably would have done a quick change. But Frederick lost the faceoff to Leon Draisaitl. The Bruins were hemmed in their zone without puck possession. And, I mean, the rationale was that Carlo had handled McDavid pretty well throughout the game, but you're not starting any rushes the other way with Brandon Carlo out on the ice. Let's be honest. He's not beating anybody down to the other end of the ice. I would have preferred just go, the standard 2 forward. Even if you had Frederick and DeBrusk out there, DeBrusk a mainstay on the penalty kill with Charlie McAvoy. You get the puck, pass it off to DeBrusk. He's off to the races the other way. So that was my main complaint there. I can see the rationale, but I didn't love that decision. But overall, again, 3 points from 2 games, back-to-back nights against the Oilers and the Maple Leafs. The Bruins will be back in action tomorrow night against Toronto. Toronto will be coming off the back-to-back in this one as they are hosting the Buffalo Sabres tonight. So they will have to travel to Boston late tonight and have to face the Bruins in the same situation that Boston was facing against Edmonton. Altogether, it was a pretty solid game for the Bruins. They limited the Oilers to only 26 shots, 1 goal in regulation. That was late. It highlighted Boston's need for help in the face-off dot, certainly. We could have used that defensive zone face-off win late in the third period, as well as in overtime. The Bruins went only 42.6% success rate from the dots, and perhaps they should be looking there specifically for help here at the trade deadline. And there appears to be an opportunity perhaps to get in on a guy who we thought had already been moved and was not going to be available, and that's Elias Lindholm, now of the Vancouver Canucks. And we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. All right, we are about 20 games left in the season, but there's still plenty of time to get in on the action with Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for daily fantasy sports because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. How does it work? Well, all you have to do is pick whether studs like David Pastrnak, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon will record more or less than their sleeper projections for goals, assists, plus, minus, and more. Goalies, you can do the same thing with saves. To win 100 times your bet, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. So win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. The 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker-dealer. All right, thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, do check out the Locked On Sports Today channel free on YouTube as well as on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. All the sports stories from the day, from around all the major sports league, from local hosts, national shows, Locked On Sports Today. Get into it. All right, now the Boston Bruins could unexpectedly find themselves back in the Elias Lindholm sweepstakes. Now, it had long been rumored that the Bruins were pursuing the two-way center, but that seemed to fizzle out after the Flames traded him to Vancouver back on January 31st. However, the Athletic's Chris Johnston reported on Tuesday that the Vancouver Canucks are believed to be among those pursuing Jake Guentzel from the Pittsburgh Penguins. And word is they've had discussions about potentially flipping Lindholm to the Bruins as part of the machinations to make it happen. Nothing concrete at this time. This was 4:31 p.m. yesterday afternoon. Still a lot of moving parts. That would be quite a turn of events. Now, in order to facilitate that, the Bruins would have to create some cap space because Lindholm, I believe, is making 4.875 against the cap this season. That's, of course, prorated, but the Bruins do not have any room at the moment. Like, literally no room at all to work with. So it would have to be somebody moving out. And further to this report, Jeff Merrick tweeted, he's of Sportsnet, of course. He tweeted last night that Jason Zucker was held out of the lineup by the Arizona Coyotes. And the Bruins are believed to be one of the teams that is interested. He said, quote, Boston may need someone to fill in for any asset they move in a different or bigger deal. Zucker, of course, is a veteran left winger. And you think, well, maybe to create some cap space, the Bruins will move Jake DeBrusk out to bring Lindholm in. And then they acquire Zucker on the cheap to try to fill in for the scoring that has been lost by sending Jake DeBrusk out. That's the first thing that came to my mind anyways. The Bruins literally have $57,500 in available cap space. So somebody's got to be moving out if they are indeed going to be looking at Lindholm. Now, Lindholm hasn't played great for the Canucks since arriving in Vancouver, but he has achieved more than 60 points 3 times in his career, 82 points back in 21-22. He's 29 years old, finished second in voting to Patrice Bergeron in 21-22. He can win faceoffs. He's got a 56% winning rate in the faceoff dots. He blocks shots. He's got some takeaways. He's a 53.4 faceoff guy for his career. Now, Vancouver did pay a high price for Lindholm. Forward Andrei Kuzmenko, a couple of prospects, a first and conditional 4th round pick. But the reality is they might take something less than what they paid to acquire him in order to acquire Jake Guentzel, which I guess is a bigger need for them, a scoring winger. Now, Lindholm can become a free agent this summer. He's going to be getting a big raise on his current cap hit of 4.85. He could, of course, play down the middle. He could fit in very well with Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle. He would be, I don't want to say a dream acquisition, but he would be a very valuable piece for this Bruins team. And if he's going to be available for less than what the Canucks paid from Calgary, it's something that you got to look at. Now, again, it is going to cost a roster player, possibly Jake DeBrusk. And we've already seen the Florida Panthers start to load up a little bit here with the trade this morning. We'll discuss that later on in the podcast. But you have to assess, whether or not Jake DeBrusk is worth keeping around. And as a pending unrestricted free agent, would you rather move him out now, bring in Zucker to fill in for the balance of this season, and invest in Lindholm instead of DeBrusk moving forward? I mean, probably Lindholm is a more valuable and better all-around player than Jake DeBrusk, but not necessarily by much. And you have to be willing to weigh out the transition from a new team, whether or not you can even afford to keep him around, or if he wants to sign a contract extension with the Boston Bruins. But the Bruins might react to what has already been happening around the Atlantic Division. And we'll discuss here what the Florida Panthers have accomplished on Wednesday, 2 days ahead of the deadline here, as the podcast continues. If you're hiring, then there's no better place to get the highest quality candidates than Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform that gives you the best quality and quantity of candidates. You're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. With the Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offers valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Terms and conditions apply. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed, and go to Indeed.com/lockedon. So as we're discussing whether or not the Bruins should go in on Elias Lindholm with Vancouver, and whether it could cost them Jake DeBrusk, who would you rather invest in moving forward? I would argue it would be Lindholm, as he has that face-off ability. He can put up some points. He's older, but if you're not committed to DeBrusk long-term, then why not bring him in, Lindholm that is, and see what he can accomplish. Now, the Florida Panthers have already started loading up. They pulled off a deal with the Ottawa Senators this morning to acquire Vladimir Tarasenko. It's a conditional 4th-round pick in 2024 and a 3rd-round pick in 2025. That seems like a very low cost to get a player like Tarasenko. He's, of course, not the same player he once was, but they're just adding depth scoring to what is already a pretty loaded roster. And before you complain about the return or say Ottawa got fleeced, Tarasenko could basically pick where he wanted to go. He had a full no trade clause. Ottawa's mistake was signing him to a 1-year deal with a full no trade clause. They had zero leverage. Tarasenko apparently didn't have much intention on staying, so he could basically pick where he wanted to go. He wanted to go to Florida. The Panthers could basically say, well, we'll give you this. If you don't want to send him to us, you can hold on to him for nothing. See if you can get, he's not going to go anywhere else. So you either keep him and get nothing. Ottawa could have done that, or you take whatever you can and move on. That's what they decided to do. And unfortunately, it was the Panthers, because they're already ahead of the Bruins in the standings and just seemingly getting stronger. They've won 6 in a row. They're 9-1 in their last 10. We'll update the power rankings more on tomorrow's show, but they're 3 points ahead of the Bruins with a game in hand. and they have overtaken first overall as well. They got 90 points, 3 more than the Canucks and Bruins. 714 point percentage, a plus 61 goal differential, which is tops in the NHL. They certainly seem like the team to beat, although let's not kid ourselves and say that just because you win the President's Trophy that you're guaranteed to have success. The Panthers should know that better than anybody, that they need to be really prepared heading into the playoffs. And that's why they're adding some reinforcements in Vladimir Tarasenko. Now for the Bruins, again, the plan was always for this to be a transition year. They're going to have much more available cap space this coming summer. They're carrying the overages for, think about it, $4.5 million. That's basically what the cap space you need to get a Lindholm, and that's being taken up by bonus overages for Bergeron and Krejci at the moment. Those will be coming out the books. The cap is going up. They have some unrestricted free agents that will be coming off the books. They'll have a lot more money to play with this season, although they do have to sign Jeremy Swayman to a long-term deal. But if you can pull off a trade for Lindholm, that will help them this season. Again, the problem last night. Faceoffs, needing another center who's strong two-way forward. I mean, ideally, you would have had a guy like Johnny Beecher out there taking a face-off. You can't rely on your fourth-line center right now to take a face-off. You can't really rely on your third, second, maybe your first guy. But if you bring in Lindholm, that is fixed. He's the guy right there to take those face-offs in the defensive zone and help clear it out and get the win. So if you can swing a deal for him and keep him beyond this year, then it's something worth looking at. But I don't want the Bruins to just sell and give up picks in an attempt to keep up in an arms race with the Panthers, because they probably aren't going to beat the Panthers. I can see them possibly beating Toronto in the first round. We saw them win the other night against the Maple Leafs. They've got another game tomorrow night against Toronto, which they can make another statement. Toronto's no, guaranteed loss by any stretch of the imagination. But once you get to the second round and beyond, much more challenging for the Bruins. And again, it's not guaranteed that they would beat Toronto either. So let's not kid ourselves there. Anyways, we will know more about the Bruins as the day continues. If there's any developments, I'll jump on the YouTube channel and I will be sure to provide instant reaction to any moves or solid rumors surrounding the Boston Bruins. We'll be back tomorrow to update the power rankings and to preview the game against the Maple Leafs and bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Take care of yourselves. Friends, sorry for the late release. Had some family stuff this morning, but please do share this podcast. Tell a friend about Locked On Boston Bruins and join me again tomorrow to talk about all things Spoked B.